welcome to DxTalks, where expert and business leader gather and share real life story about digital transformation. So this program is powered by Everyday Digital, a consulting arm of Everyday Corporation, which is also a leading ICT company in Vietnam. So my name is Phạm Hồ Trung, Director of Consulting at Everyday Digital, and I'm going to be the host of the today episodes. So I would like to welcome our special guest today, starting with Mr. Nguyen. He is also a founder and general director of Trusting Social. Mr. Nguyễn Anh Tuấn, he is the head of IT division at Techcombank, and Mr. Dương Quốc Tú, head of retail banking and digital banking division at Saigon Hanoi Bank. Thank you very much for your time joining us today. So in this episode, we will discuss a very hot topic nowadays, which is called AI, artificial intelligence. And we're going to understand how this technology is being applied in various industries, including the financial and banking industry, and other verticals industry as well. So the first question goes to Mr. Nguyen. So we see now today in many media channels and in many business forums, they are mentioning about generative AI, which ChatGPT. So this has become a buzzword, not only among the citizens, but also in the business community. So we would like to understand what this technology really means and how we categorize AIs, and how the business can also apply it into the daily operations.
That is a very big question. So I'm going to take a little bit more time to provide a context. In general, we can divide technology revolutions into specific revolution and general revolutions. I would name personal computer as such a general technology revolution that will transform all industries. Internet is another example of a general technology revolution. Artificial general intelligence will become another general technological revolution like that, in the sense that it will transform all industries, starting with knowledge industries such as banking, finance, education, and then governments, professional services. And then we will disrupt the manufacturing and other physical industries. The reason that I said that AGI is a general technology revolution is because for the first time, we can create machines that can think, more precisely can reason. So Trusting Social have been working at the forefront of what we now can call narrow AI or specialized AI, where we use machine to look at trillions of data records and find out new insights that human cannot. And we have been providing this technology that empower 1 billion consumers in India, Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines to access to credit. SHB as well as Techcombank has been using our solution for that. Another example of narrow AI would be in the computer vision, where Trusting Social is now onboarding 150 million consumers every year, and making the registering for a new service much cheaper, right? But that's narrow AI, where we train machine to specialize in a very, very particular job, whereas AGI, or artificial general intelligence, is when machine can pretty much do almost every task that human can with a similar capability and variety. We have the first spark of AGI through GPT-4, and one early evidence is that nowadays even machine cannot differentiate between what is created by ChatGPT versus human, right? So that's called the Turing test, where now you can no longer differentiate between these two. Even OpenAI have to give up their own model to predict what was created by AI, right? You know, I have been spending like 20 years in researching AI, but we have always thought that AI AGI would be like 20, 30, 50 years in the future. And suddenly now it's happening, right? And another test for AGI is like Llama 2 model or GPT-4 model can pass a lot of college level tests as well as postgraduate exams, right? When a machine can reason like a human and can start working, it will transform the world economy, right? So interestingly, we divide evolution of AGI into 5 levels of automation. The first level is pure Q&A and conversational AI, like ChatGPT, right? The next level is when it starts having some skills, for example, programming skill or data analytics or speaking skills, right? Then the next level would be when it has combined with domain knowledge and becomes expert in certain areas. The fourth level is when it can self-learn, and imagine that millions or billions of autonomous agents or the machine that can think and act independently can start learning from their daily work and their experience and share knowledge with each other. And the highest level would be like fully autonomous agents with full agency that can even be recognized by the governments. For example, when we get a drug prescription from an autonomous agent that use it to buy drugs from a drugstore or get insurance cover for our purchases. The whole world is still in shock by how fast this AGI is approaching, right? Including OpenAI, which is the catalyst of this revolution, right? Therefore, there's a global race at the government level. The EU, the US, the China, India, and all major superpowers are now racing against time to achieve AGI. And Treating so in part is participating in this revolution by building a factory of autonomous agents that can do tasks, right? So we have our agents are serving Trusting Social customers. Our agents have been doing data analytics and actually automate 100% of one part of the of our business. Agents that can program, and it's actually helping us to program other agents. The key message here is that AGI is already here, and it's happening very fast. It's going to disrupt knowledge industry in the next 12 months. IBM, for example, have a new report saying that 40% of the jobs will have to be reskilled in the next 12 months. 40%, right? And imagining that the knowledge industry in the world accounts for 50% and 65% of the total world GDP. And now it's being disrupted at an amazing speed. I think my key message here is AGI is already here. It's going to happen very fast. Nobody is prepared for it, including the pioneers, the governments, and especially the businesses, right? But at the same time, we have a choice to adopt it now, right? For example, the first step would be to let your employees to use ChatGPT during in their work, and then the next step would be to have a knowledge agents that basically suck in all the enterprise knowledge, and then start being helpful as an assistant for your employees. And then the next is probably forming the AGI transformation teams within your organization. And the last step would be, once you successfully achieve all that goals, then start thinking about how AGI would help you to disrupt your own business model, right? For example, education definitely will be disrupted in the next 12 months. In banking, it's probably going to take longer, but it also provides a very big opportunity to rethink about how we can serve tens of millions of consumers, right? That today we only can serve like the top, 1-2% of them. So this is a big opportunity, and at the same time, it's a big threat. Due to the nature of a general technological revolution, we can compare it like as a biblical flood. That no matter where you stay, if you stay at a sea level, it's going to reach you right away. mountaintop, it's going to take maybe a few years, but eventually it's going to reach you. So you have to prepare for it. And the world is racing in this revolution, and now is the time.
Thank you for giving us a very bright context about what this technology is capable of. But actually, is that also one of the things that we need to look into, that with that speedy development of technology, so many businesses, so they have fear of that in the future, there's a war of machines, and the machine will be dominant in the world, right? The enterprise be aware of when they still want to maintain the interaction between human and machine. So not only to make sure that human, we are still working, to earn food on the table, while having the machine to support on the other hand side, right? So that is something, a big question I want to bring this into this discussion, to see what is your opinion about this matter, about the human and machine interaction. So maybe you can start with Mr. Tuấn.
Sure, sure. So I think that's the fear that most of the people just talk about it, but I don't think it will never realize, because machine can never replace human. That's basically my prediction. It can help us. It can be very helpful in what we do. Just like Anh already said, right? There are many competing models in AI nowadays, and the gap between this model and the next model is just 3 to 4 months away. Compared to in the past, it's like a couple years. Like the Google and the Microsoft, it took them years to get to where they are today. But now, once they realize what is the thing that they need to fix and tweak it, it just takes a couple months to perfect their model. So the speed is amazingly fast. And the key thing is the implication of that is so widespread, even from the banking industry, right? We are really focusing on customer using technologies to give them the best experience. So, whatever we do probably will need to be met with the speed of, almost the speed of light nowadays. So a lot of things that we do really need to enforce, the customer experience, that, whatever we do is going to be for that particular customer, enhancing that customer experience, giving the customer choice that they don't even know that they need that choice. All of that, no human being can have the knowledge comprehensively to provide that. But if we have the machine learning or all of that thing, to provide that at the fingertip, then our people, our relationship managers and the frontline, workforce can effectively help our customer in a very, very kind of unimaginable way in the past. Talking about people with the knowledge of personal investment to insurance, and each of those domain is as deep as they can be, right? So if you have all of that, understanding, it takes years for the human being to get there. But if you got the machine, if you got the tool, kind of, cut down that learning curve a whole lot and be more effective in front of your customer. And not only just from the front line, but on the back office as well. There's study from Google and other organizations, actually, ChatGPT helping with, the developer to write code. And there was proven that 35 to 40% of productivity has been gained just by using the cut and paste the code from those AI model, right? So again, I'm pretty sure it will make, human being way more effective, but I don't believe in, machine will replace human one day.
So with AI, I think it's like we are traveling with plane. It's replacing that we have to walk on foot or something like that. It just helps us to speed up the process and somehow enhance our reach to the customer and support also the hyper customization like you shared about. And how about you, Mr. Tu? How about you work at SHB right now, and how do you see this problem?
So I think I had a joke with this gentleman before that out of the three of us, I'm the least technical. So I come from everything probably from a business sense into driving digital transformation. And not just myself, but anyone who's listening to this podcast today will be terrified, right, of what Nguyen is saying. I mean, this future that it could be a year or several years away is terrifying, right? It's going to disrupt major industries, maybe even destabilize some countries in what they're doing. So it's extremely scary. And I think for countries that are large enough, well-resourced, have been preparing this for the last 70 years, they have a much better chance of being able to understand what it is, learn how to use it and apply it. Now, we talked about the biblical flood, right? So Vietnam's a little bit different. So Vietnam is not on top of the mountain, right? Vietnam is down here, right? Down here. So when the flood comes, Vietnam's probably going to be hit first. So Vietnam does have some uniqueness in the characteristics of the country, right? And Vietnam benefits from, I think when we study international business, there's a concept called the waterfall effect. So what happens in developed countries goes to developing countries, right? So Vietnam, I think, has some time to watch, and a little bit like the technologies before, it can watch to see what happens in these developing advanced countries, how does it play out, how does the regulations change, how do the social structures change, how do institutions respond, and then we have a chance to decide that do we follow a similar path, or maybe choose to leapfrog in certain parts. So I think, like, for example, mobile adoption in Vietnam, we just went straight, right? Went straight to mobile. So we bypassed about 10 or 15 years worth of what other developing countries have gone through. Now, from the perspective of a bank, which is also a more traditional industry in Vietnam, even though we're applying technology rapidly, I think it's still very hard to understand how AI is going to change the world, how AI is going to change Vietnam, how AI is going to change the customer experience, and then how we as a bank should be adopting it to the benefit of customers and our broader shareholders. And I think, to be honest, most banks in Vietnam are still grappling with narrow AI. Generative AI is still way out there, right? So even narrow AI and trying to find use cases for how we can implement it cost effectively to show returns to maybe the senior management team or to the board. I mean, even the board is like quite distant from technology as a whole, so they're very far away from that. So every time we say we want to implement something AI related, the number one question that comes up is like, great, are you going to make me more money? Are you going to save me money? And with general AI, you can't conclude that because it can do so much, right? But at least with narrow AI, we can then say, all right, I'll take Anh Nguyen's example of what he's been doing in the last 10 to 15 years, right? I can take social data, all right? I can apply some interaction and intuition onto that data, and then I can make a better credit decision. And through that, there's less people needed to make the decision. The NPLs will be lower. And so it's a good business sense. So I will be happy to apply AI to that use case. And I think lots of businesses in Vietnam and in the developing countries are still working through that roadmap of what I can apply. And then if we start now talking about general AI and how general AI could be an autonomous agent sitting in the office being assigned a task as part of a squad to do some work, I think that's still a very far leap. And I personally think about this, and Nguyen and I have had a chance on various occasions to talk about it. I still struggle to see how we could get there even in the next couple of years, right? And there's another part that just personally, as an individual, I think I struggle with is when you don't understand technology and how it works. I mean, to be honest, a lot of us don't understand the conclusion or the output from a machine learning algorithm. So how do you get comfortable with adopting and using that bit of technology? So the technology could be advanced. It could do everything Nguyen said, but the individuals involved in decision making who don't grasp it and don't understand it will always provide the ceiling in which this technology can. So are we at the tipping point for this? Maybe here I disagree with Nguyen. It makes sense for a small group of people who are in the field to understand it, who can see the possibilities. But for those who don't deal with it on a daily basis, it's way too scary. It's not tangible enough, and they haven't had a chance to debate and think about it enough, and therefore their adoption of it and their support of it will still be at an arm's length for a while. And so for now, I think even as I think about my roadmap for the next 12 to 18 months, it will be less generative AI, it will be more narrow AI with a little bit of what does generative AI can do. For example, generative AI can write better job descriptions than your HR analyst. Yeah, I don't need another HR analyst. I can have a manager sit there, input into ChatGPT, spit out the job description, she then oversees it, edits a bit, and then it's done. So a task that used to be half a day, she can do in 30 minutes. Those applications are okay, but more advanced, autonomous, I think is going to be a while. So for me, not as optimistic about it as Nguyen and to some extent Antoine.
So let me follow on with this line of thought, right? Number one, I don't think that AGI will be able to replace human in short term or in even medium term. The opportunity lies in serving mass consumers 10 times better. For example, imagine a young man living in a village. Today, if he gets sick, until he gets very, very sick, he's going to go to the hospital. But tomorrow, with autonomous agent who are well trained on, let's say, diagnosis, that young man will be much more educated about the disease and when he should go to the hospital. And that is a very immediate benefit of generative AI. And we can see that in banking, right? Why mass consumers don't go to a bank and borrow money, right? Because of the fear of rejection, because of the complexity in past experience and so on. But in the future, personal financial assistant, such consumer will become prosumer, who understand the product very well, who can compare product from different banks or different insurance companies, and they will not be misled by sales agents or others, right? So I think the big opportunity in serving consumers 10 times better than today, because generative AI or AGI will bring down the cost of knowledge by a factor of 10, right? So previously we probably need like 2 months to train an agent or sales agent to understand 20 different products of a bank, but now with a machine it can do it in a couple of days. And then at the same time serving tens of millions of customers. Extremely flexible in terms of intellectual capabilities, but at the same time, businesses have been specializing, like you have maybe 100 different roles within a bank. And that division of labor actually make it much simpler for AI to fill in the gap. For example, for underwriting, right? A machine can look at like tens of millions of loan applications and the outcome of loan performance, whereas human would, for the lifetime would be able to do like tens of thousands of loan application only. So it means that the machine is already 1,000 times better. But with this AGI, I think it's going to accelerate that process, and it is an opportunity for consumers. Now, there's a concern about jobs, but I think it is only a concern because of our limited imagination, right? So in the past, when we have cars, of course, a lot of people with horse cartridges will lose their job. But we don't see tens of millions of people, banking, because that industry then create a lot of job opportunities for manufacturing cars and servicing cars and selling cars and all the additional jobs created. It is true that because the world is in shock, it's difficult to see what are the new jobs will be created. But there's a basic rule called Givon's rule, that when something is 10x cheaper, there will be new demand for that will create new opportunities. So I would not be as pessimistic about creating jobs in the future. And because generative AI is so good at creating content, reskilling the workforce for the new opportunity, I would guess, would be much cheaper, like a 10x cheaper to train somebody from, let's say, a customer support job to a, let's say, priority customer support, right? And this person now would have much higher salary because the service that he or she can produce would be much more personalized with a human touch, and it requires the level of compassion that you just can't afford if you have to pick up like 100 calls every day.
You're right, because we saw many call centers gone away and replaced with a digital agent to help them cope with the customer and help them solve their problems. So we have just gone through the world and Vietnam context. So How do you evaluate the digital maturity of the Vietnamese companies when they apply new technology? Because I heard from the business view from Mr. Tu that he also mentioned that, yeah, to persuade the business leader to use a new technology is a very hard way to go, right? And to also convince him or her about the return on investment we receive from the technology is another story, right? But actually, you also mentioned about reskilling people. And Vietnam is also a country where people in the working age are still not at the high school education level. So how the business in Vietnam can really reskill or upskilling the current workforce to cope with the new technology and to work with the technology?
It really depends on the industry. For example, the banking industry is such a critical infrastructure of the economy that they are licensed to live. They have time. They have a big opportunity of serving customers 10 times better, and whoever can serve the customer 10 times better in terms of quality and personalization will get a very big market share. And that is the pressure that everybody else will have to catch up, right? So Techcombank, for example, it is a pioneer in terms of customer experience and serving the premium customers extremely well, right? And have the market-leading return on TOI, right? Total operating income per customer. Now, if Techcombank can do that with the same, with the mass consumers, then suddenly everybody else in the market have to follow that. It's similar to the first bank who have the mobile banking app, right? It creates pressure for everybody else to meet the same standard. So I think right now there's nobody doing that. So we are kind of a calm before the storm. But once there's somebody proving that concept and alleviate the customer experience, then suddenly the arm race will start, right? So you can see that, for example, ChatGPT is the fastest adopting technology for consumer, and I'm pretty sure that with a 20% hallucination rate, which means that very low quality, but the adoption is amazing. It's just 10 times faster than the next fastest company in terms of reaching the first million customer. I think that the revolution will happen on the consumer side that put pressure to every businesses.
So maybe let me just add on that point, and then we can circle back to the training and employees. I think at this stage you have over 40-something banks in Vietnam, and in the Vietnamese context, it's what is your strategy? Is your strategy to go after high-end, high-value customers? In which case, from experience, these customers are looking for a more personal touch. Yeah, and they want to be able to look someone in the eye, shake their hand, be able to go drinking with them. And so they are still valuing that human interaction for non-technical things. And there's a lot of karaoke things that you do, drinking things that you do, which a machine can never replace. Right. So for high-value customers, I think the human percentage of interactions will always continue to be high. And then there'll be a small part that either narrow or generative AI can play to support that interaction. And over time, you can look for opportunities to increase that percentage that they support. As we go down to the middle class and the mass segments of the customer base, that's where the applications, like Nguyen is saying, start to get more value. But so these organizations these banks have decided, do I want to play in this space first? Now, if the answer is yes, I want to play in mass market, and my current operating model is not sufficient to serve that market, then I need to look for more creative, more technology-based ways to do that. And that's when we'll start to consider something like a generative AI to be able to support it. Now, but that's from a philosophical point of view. I can have a low cost of implementation, low cost of acquisition, low cost of management. And as such, I can still generate a high return, even though these customers maybe on average have 50,000 dong in their bank account. But I can still generate a sufficient 2 or 3% margin on that, so I'm okay. Now, that's the philosophical side of it. Now, we need to look on the customer side. So we can't come from a view that just because we create this great technology-based experience, that customers will adopt it. I think it will come, but it will take a long time for people to get comfortable with having, ChatGPT write them a song, write them a message, a birthday message, write them a short story, to actually trusting it to give them financial advice, trusting it to open their bank account, trusting it to recommend a credit card, trusting it to recommend a personal loan, trusting it to carry out a transaction. Because when it comes to money, the human interaction this is that people are still very worried. And when you don't have much money, you protect it more than a lot of people that have a lot of money, right? If my pay is 4 million a month, right, and I'm engaging with the machine tells me, I can earn a good interest rate if I do this, and that's 3 of my 4 million. I've got to think about that. And I want to then talk to someone to validate, So just because the technology exists, I don't think immediately the masses will come to it. Now, we need to find a way to put that experience into their daily lives. So just a small example, before I came to Vietnam, I was with a company called Time, and we built technology for the emerging masses, right? People who were underbanked. And what we saw was that you can't try to build branches in their communities to help them, because that's expensive. But what we saw was they would go into shopping centers, and they would go in early hours and late hours, and shopping centers were open longer than branches. So strategically, it made sense to put a kiosk in there to serve them, and so that moved within their journey. So now, if we want to harness the power of either narrow AI or generative AI in creating a low-cost operating model to serve these customers, we really need to think about who these mass customers are, what is their daily journey, and how can we inject it to make their life easier. Not force them to learn about the new technology, force them to learn about a new interaction, force them to get a device. So, if I take a moving example, if I'm a poor person in the middle of nowhere, and only when I'm sick I go to hospital, but if I don't have a device, no one's going to tell me I'm sick, right? So how do we get the internet infrastructure out there? How do we get a device that they can interact with? Then teach them that it's okay to trust this machine, and if this machine gives you a certain recommendation, it's okay to then carry out that recommendation. So I think there's a lot of time and effort still needs to go through in educating the market. And so those who go first will see good adoption, but they'll have to burn a lot of money in educating and converting the masses before it gets to a point where enough people trust it to do something with. That timeline, I don't have a view on it, but I just know it's going to take a bit longer, and it will cost quite a bit of money. So whoever goes first is going to have high cost, but hopefully a high return. Yeah. So that's just adding on to the comment about the experience and go to the mass market.
Yeah, sure. I'm just going to add some more point to it. So basically, at the end of the day, it's about the experience, and we all know machine couldn't do the karaoke with you, right? So that's why I say that machine will never replace a human being. But the thing is, it boils down to you have to do things well, okay? Whether for the customer or for your organization or for your internal employee, it boils down to, how are we performing the job or the task that are 10 times faster or cheaper or with lesser error rate kind of thing, right? Because when you talk about generative AI, you really don't have the control over the model itself because it's generating by itself. So if you feed it the wrong information, I'm not quite sure I would trust the model to give me the diagnostic of what am I having my sickness with, and it may subscribe to me some kind of medicine or something that may not be correct, because it's been proven with ChatGPT as an example. You can give it a topic and it gives you really amazing result back, but then it's also giving you the next day a very crappy result at the same time. It just depends on all the input that you get it in, and machine learn and train itself. So if there are some factors that are really trying to be the bad actors, right? Generative AI can be a danger in its own. So again, I think we need to proceed with caution, and that's why I think that there is the bright future for all of these things if we know how to harness and use the model in the right way and get all the productivity, all the benefit of technology to help the human being. But if we are not careful, it could be a double-edged sword that we may be in danger of that as well. Again, that is the 1 or 2%, but again, we just need to be, open our eye and walk into it knowing what it is.
I think There's also one important side I want to mention about is despite the speedy development of technology like AI, use case besides enhancing customer experience and personalization in your industry, like banking industry. So what is other use case besides from those?
Going back to trust in social, we've been using them for a very basic, and everybody know about that is a requirement called EKYC. When we open an account with a bank or any product and services, we have to do that. But now with technology advance, deepfakes here, deepfake there, even that process is being questionable, right? So again, I think, we are partnering and working with our partners like Trust in Social, and even with our own data kind of analytic arms within the bank to find out what are the level, what are the things that we can pull and adjust our model so that, you get less, problem with the outcome of it. At the end of the day, it's still the customer experience, right? Because if we have a lot of false positive rate, that's still not a good thing. But if you are too generous on it, then you're hurting your bottom line. So what is the right balance? That is where I think we are having to partner and work together for a lot. So that's one of the areas that I think that's a shared pain point for the entire banking financial services industry. But beyond that, like for example, think about all of the potential of what you can do with, being a robo advisor. Again, Vietnam maybe at the bottom, but well, like US or Europeans or Australia, robo advisor is there already for the last, at least 5 to 10 years. So it's not a new thing, but how are we getting there from, where we are today with the custom, with the culture, with the mindset of the local, how we kind of put it into a melting pot and make it become the thing for the Vietnamese market. So I think that's another thing that we are really, wanting to take advantage of the technologies and explore that further. And I'm sure that, this is one of the topics. I know, that's why I say it. I know you are passionate about it. That's why I kind of, mentioning it so that you can chime in.
Yeah, no, I think maybe I'll answer it a bit, I'll take the lead and answer it a bit more broadly. I think before, and Nguyen gave an example that, banks are well protected, and banks are one of those institutions where, whether on purpose or not, they have broken down lots of tasks into smaller components. Now, that actually lends itself to the adoption of AI. So naturally, when you've broken things down to smaller enough components, you can do that. So my point of view is that a bank is just a value chain of activities. Right, and so to help everyone understand, the value chain has to serve customers. So you have retail customers on one side and you have corporate customers on the other side. And then underlying these value chain of customers are operational and support services that run in parallel. So if you start with the value chain, so we talked a lot about customer experience, so I won't mention that anymore. But if we then go to the middle office, right, the product development, understanding customers. So AI has immense potential there. How do you do a market analysis? Just ask someone, it generates you maybe a 60-70% view. Then you hand it to a person who's a bit more highly skilled than what the AI is at right now to be able to delve in, drill down, rationalize, and create a story around that can sell internally. And so there's a lot around customer, CVP, pricing, competitive analysis that you could get a productivity increase. I think there's a report I read that's somewhere between 40 to 50% productivity increase. So I believe that. And I think a lot of the middle office functions, you can do that. Then as you go down to managing, once you acquire the customer, have the customer in your book, a lot of the bank is about operational risk management, legal risk management, and then regulatory risk management and credit risk management. So all of that can be done by machine. So the government releases a new mandate or a new decree. A person doesn't have to read it, a machine can read it, compare it to what we've done previously, see where the delta is, spit out that information, summarize it in a way that a person can understand it, and then give you recommendations of what you can do based upon what it understands in the organization. So you can do all of that for all your different risk categories, and so that would then help decision makers like myself look at it and make better calls. So if I'm a bank that has that compared to a bank that doesn't, I'm sure I'll have to get a 10-15% uplift in my productivity. So that then is worth investing in. And then you've got a number of support services from just general operations that we talked about. Do you need a call center? Can you have an AI do all of that for you? Probably tick yes, you can. but it needs to be trained, it needs to be followed, it needs to be evolved and adapted, and you need Vietnamese specific, because most of the ones now are English speaking, so we need to train it to make it Vietnamese specific. And then you have all the marketing, HR, support processes underneath, and even technology teams. I think every single function in the bank can benefit anywhere between 10 to 50% from including various versions of AI technologies. And so now, how do you do that? And to do that, you have people in senior roles need to understand, need to break down essentially the business architecture of the organization, work out which components of the business architecture can benefit, and have a serious internal conversation about it. And then you get into the second point, which is who can help serve that need, and then you do the implementation, and then you extract the value out of it. So I think there's a lot that business can do in implementing and adopting AI, but they have to be very clear and quite strategic about what they do, and you can't just treat it as a little side project, because that way you won't be messy, right? You'll be doing it here when you remember, when you don't look at there, and then all you do is going to burn money without having a clear roadmap of how these things connect together, and then you get the combined benefit of all of these activities. Yeah.
I think his point of view is actually strategic and broad, right? And I have talked to probably hundreds of different financial institutions and different talked to them about different pain points, right? And I realized that the first and the most immediate application would be knowledge management. Even in banking industry, which is very process driven and very organized in terms of knowledge management, if you go to a bank's website, you see a few thousand documents, and many of them are in conflicting modes. Now, this generative AI is very good at that, synthesizing information and making sure that everything is updated and communicate that to employees, right? As simple as setting up HR, compliance, knowledge assistant within a bank. It can be done in a week, and it can improve productivity significantly, right? So that's the first use case that I think every enterprise should do. In many industries, the knowledge is mostly in humans' head, and it's actually disappear when that person quit the job, right? So, and that's a very big pain point for many industries, including, for example, banking industry. But in the future, we can have a very rich knowledge management system that are live, and bring the gap between somebody who have 20 years of experience and somebody fresh out of college. And that factor alone, I think, very helpful for especially the young job seekers. Within the banking industry, I think the compliance can almost like 99% automated, right? For example, decent sized bank would have millions of sales calls, collection calls, customer support calls. How do you guarantee that 100% of them is actually comply? It's a big headache, right? Banks in the US get fined like billions of dollars for violating money laundering, regulations, or mis-selling. And even in Vietnam, right, we have this scandal of banks selling insurance products, and then there's certain insurance companies that get into trouble because we don't have the technology. But nowadays, the technology is ready to solve that problem completely, which is one of the biggest pain points for bank, right? And then we see across financial services, the information gets centralized and become a bottleneck somewhere, right? Which is the business intelligence unit, right? So if you are a salesperson on the field, you want to know like, how am I doing this week versus last week? It's going to have to go to BICC and then wait for like 2 weeks in order to get the report. And by then the market has changed. Now we can democratize information within businesses. We need to rethink organizational structure, right? Where in the future maybe AGI will do a lot of jobs, and how to fit human into that kind of ecosystem in a way that alleviate the quality of work for human and the work satisfaction for human, and bring out the unique skills that human have. And I think compassion is a very, very unique skill that no machine will ever be able to replicate, because they are not designed for that job, right? They're designed for logical reasoning, processing a lot of data, responding very, very quickly, but they're not designed for compassion because they don't suffer, they don't love, right? So, and in the future, I think that would be a much well compensated comparing to a customer support role today that, you know, make a couple $100 a month. I think this will be an evolution, and it's lack of imagination in general kind of stop us from foreseeing that, right? Like even Bill Gates failed to predict the internet, and now we are in a similar situation, right? And I think that requires collaboration, right? So, like we are tech-oriented companies, and you are a customer experience business. How do we collaborate to create new, basically a brave new world?
So looking beyond the key players we have here, like you from a solution provider and you are from banking industry, yeah? So what kind of other stakeholders within this kind of collaboration we also need to facilitate the widely use of technology and make sure it also contributes to the economy of Vietnam?
So maybe I take a first step. So this technology have different layers, right? The first layer is the hardware, right? So that's NVIDIA. That's why they become a $1 trillion company pretty much, you know, within 6 months. Exactly. And but there are new entrants to this market, and the new way of developing generative AI models and large language models, maybe using CPU instead of GPU, and probably longer term the IGU or intelligence computing units. So the new ways of building the hardware layer, right? And then you have another layer of foundation models like GPT-4, the Llama model, the Falcon model, and so on. That's where I think the governments and the big corporations can play. Trusting Social is playing in this level itself, right? So we are not building gigantic models that requires like 10,000 GPUs at the same time, but we are building industry focused models. And I think that, you know, more and more people will enter this LLM model layer because it's getting cheaper and cheaper over time, right? And then the third layer would be applications where banks, you know, consumer finance companies, e-commerce, they will eventually come up with very, very good solutions that fits very specific use cases, like to mention, right? How do I serve a customer who feel uncomfortable going to a fancy branch, but instead going to a corner of a supermarket and do business or banking transaction there? What kind of solution that fits that context? It's going to take a little bit longer, but I think there are multiple level of this revolution that different players will participate. I think education is very, very critical here. And this revolution happens so fast that the education system will not be able to adapt as fast. So it is the enterprise that, you know, have to reskill their employees in the next 12 months, 24 months will be very, very critical. Otherwise, we'll see a lot of turbulence within the workforce.
There's a long way to go. So what would be your advice for our businesses when they embark their journey on digital transformation, applying new technology?
Yeah, so again, you know, just like what they say, if you don't transform, if you don't reinvent yourself, you'll become a dinosaur very soon. So I think that's a lesson that everybody in business have to adhere to and follow, okay? But there's a couple of things that Tu already mentioned. You know, you have to make sure that there is the right structure, the right will, the right mindset being put in place before you're actually doing any of those things. Because without the proper support system, the decision-making support system or anything like that, then the technology or whatever that you're trying to transform probably will be spending a lot of effort with not a lot of return. So again, pick the area that you think are the most pain point and beneficial to your customer, to your core competency of the organization, and basically make that as an example of how things should be done. And then the rest, the priority number 2, 3, 4, 5 will fall into place by looking up that example. So I think it's not something of a rocket science, but again, it's very hard to do, and it's actually easier said than done.
I think there's a couple of other things we need to consider in this entire equation for it to work. And the first one is customers. So how do we make sure we understand the customers so they have the motivation to be able to do that? Then how does the organization or the educational institutions or the government play a role in educating the customers so they have the ability to interact? After that, they need to see that actually this is something that is worthwhile, something that they should do as part of their daily interaction. And previously I mentioned that try to minimize disruption in their flow, because it's very difficult to change human behavior, particularly those who have been so entrenched in a certain way of working. We might think it makes sense, it's logical, but they don't, right? And that's why you have a whole field called behavioral economics, who's designed to understand the difference between what a rational person would do and what they actually do. And then how do you measure all of this and be able to provide some sort of feedback loop so that all the players in the industry can connect and learn from it? Because right now it feels like it's every man for themselves, right? Everyone's just trying to do their own thing. And unfortunately, that's not great for the industry. It's not great for the country. So I think there needs to be more either government-sponsored, education-sponsored institutions that get together, create events where we can have these open dialogues and maybe create, I hate to say, but some sort of sandboxes where you have leading players like Trust and Social who lead that, who create some of the use cases, and at a very low price point, organizations like banks can integrate with and start to see value. So even his example previously around use case for knowledge, right? Knowledge management. I mean, that's easy to say, right? But knowledge management is the heart of what makes the organization competitive. Not a lot of organizations will want to digitize that because for fear of losing it, right? So actually keeping it in paper is my competitive advantage. So I don't want anyone else to know it. Because overnight, if someone hacks me and I lose that, I'm finished. But in paper, it's hard for someone to burn me down, to go in and read every document. So in that, there is some nuance there that these organizations need to think about, need to consider, and even the compliance, right? We talked about compliance before, and compliance is something that we need to trust that the machine can do that. But unfortunately, a lot of the large learning models and algorithms that we have right now, we don't even understand how they're concluded. So how do you stand before a court, right, and say that my system said it's right, and then the courts that prove it to me, and I don't know, the system said it's right or wrong. So then it becomes, I think some regulation will come into play that will force us to have some sort of back door into these models that allows us to see some of the rationality and be able for a normal person or ordinary person to understand the logic. Because if the normal person doesn't understand the logic, then you fail most legal tests, right? What's the average person going to do in this situation? So I think a lot of this is things that we need to consider as part of the industry to make sure we can do it effectively. And at an organizational level, I think like any new bit of technology, organizations need to be staying ahead of it, stay educated, the leaders need to talk about it on a regular basis, put that into their planning cycles. As a matter of fact, that's something we'll be doing from this year, put it into planning cycles, have the robust debate, and then start to implement. But for us as a bank, we'll always use Occam's razor on this a little bit. What's the bullshit test? Is this really going to make us money? And we'll always pick the low-hanging fruit to start it off, let it roll, see what others are doing, and then we'll start to adapt. And so my guidance to everyone is don't wait, just get started, but be very cautious in the way you start and make sure it aligns with some sort of strategic imperative that you have and that you can see some value, and in that way it allows you to earn the right to continue. And I am with Nguyen 100%. This technology is here, it's coming, it's going to transform everything. And so how do we play a part in it from now?
I agree with anh Tuấn and Tu. And for me as a CEO of a company, I spend a lot of time thinking about the future and thinking about how humanity will change and how we can be a positive force during this, I would say, quite violent change in the coming years. So it is also about personal responsibility, social responsibility in the mindset of the future, not the mindset of, oh, it's going to disrupt my business and therefore be defensive about it.
Good. So I think with the discussion today, our audience can somehow have an overview of what AI is and what it's capable of and what they need to pay attention to when applying technology to their business operation. So thank you for your time sharing a very interesting story today. And for more information about FPT Digital and DxTalks, please visit our website. And thank you and see you in the next time.